Let's go.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another video with your host Ahdontron from NerdTots. We are going to be reviewing a movie today that was not on my list of movies to do, but I saw it and I thought I should watch it. It's called First Squad: The Moment of Truth. Quick synopsis of this movie is that the story is set during the opening days of World War II on the Eastern Front. Its main cast are a group of Soviet teenagers with extraordinary abilities. The teenagers have been drafted to form a special unit to fight the invading German army. They are opposed by an officer of the SS who is attempting to raise the dead, a supernatural army of crusaders from the 12th century, the Order of the Sacred Cross, and enlist them in a Nazi cause. Now, this was a movie that was done in 2009. It's a short film, it's an hour and 13 minutes long. So as per usual, if you guys don't want spoilers, because I'm gonna go into the recap, look below, read our description, cut right through to the next part where I'm gonna give spoiler-free review and my rating. I'll be looking forward to seeing you there. Those who want to stay and get the review, enjoy this recap. We're going to start off our film kind of in an interesting way. When I turned on this movie, I actually did not anticipate this. It actually started off with an interview with a war veteran from the beginning of the World War II, and he starts talking about the war. Then it goes into this quick anime cutscene where it's the title, the opening credits. Kind of feels like like the opening of an anime series and show. So you'll get like scenes of like the other characters that you're gonna see. You have like the music playing, images flashing around, things of like what could be happening in the movie, and then it cuts to another scene after that. The scene that you get a glimpse of looks like a standoff between two trenches of soldiers. Obviously, one's Russian, one's German of the sides, and it's like in the middle of the winter. No one's firing. It's a standoff, of course, until one guy gets up to lead the charge. And the moment he gets up to lead the charge, this knight in armor shows up, takes his head, and at that moment our main character is introduced. She's waking up in the back of a truck like from a nightmare. Right off the bat, we find out that she's like an orphan because of the war, and she's traveling with a group of people to entertain the troops of the Russian army. And one of the things that she does to entertain the troops is she predicts like their names and answer questions while being blindfolded, basically showing that she's clairvoyant and she has psychic abilities. Doesn't seem like much, like she's just guessing their names, you know, like what their girlfriends are gonna say and so forth like that. And then one person asks her a question, how long does he have to live? She takes off the blindfold and she sees everybody in the camp dead, like the Walking Dead. They're all shot up, missing limbs, they're all dead, but they're alive at that moment. And then she looks up and there's a plane coming in to drop bombs. The whole time everybody's just dying, and boom, that's it. Cuts to a new scene where you are now seeing a theater come up, like you're sitting there getting ready to watch a movie. If you ever seen the movie Stir of Echoes, it's kind of like that moment where Kevin Bacon is getting ready to watch a film, but he's not really there, but we as the audience see that imagery. And the main character, the girl that we're following, this is like where we learn her name. Her name's Nadia. We're seeing essentially her life flash before her eyes in this theater. I feel like old time real, where we see her growing up in her village, her best friends. You can tell who's her like first love, who is Leo, and all her friends in the village, including Leo, get drafted into a military division called Division 6. And you could tell that they were getting these special trainings, like they're learning to shoot blindfolded, fight blindfolded, work in a unit blindfolded. So they're like working on their other senses rather than, you know, traditional training tactics. And then you see that at one point, even though they were all going through this training school, the school itself in their village is attacked, and she's the only one that's a survivor. And as she's watching this, and you see there's a memory of her going and visiting the graves, one of the images of the graves turns and faces her, and it's Leo, and he warns her, he's like, you're in the veil between life and death. It is not your time, you need to get out. You're dying, you need to survive. And then she runs out the theater, wakes up in the snow with this, I would say like a monk standing over her. He essentially was searching for her, which we'll find out later why. He nurses her back to health, and in turns, that's where we find out that she has no memory. She doesn't remember her past. That's why she was traveling in the first place. he tells her that she has a special gift and she's a key to helping win the war. And the next day, he sends her off to go meet another general, General Below. As she's getting ready to leave, her and the monk are attacked by these twins. These two girls were also at the same site where everybody was bombed that we met Nadia at. Turns out they're not Russian, they're German spies. And they were actually searching for Nadia. And they can't get to her, so they attack the monk. And somehow it turns into like a martial art fight scene, which I'm not complaining. I just thought it was interesting, like to see like Nazi soldiers fighting in a martial arts style. So it was kind of interesting. They get the upper hand on the monk, but he did his job by distracting them long enough for Nadia to get away. And he falls into the ice after being shot. Because again, winter in the Soviet Union. While this is all happening, you get glimpses of like the other side where there's a SS officer who's kind of like a cult leader who's making deals with the dead, essentially. Specifically, one spirit, Baron von Wolf. He found the sword of like this Crusader knight that was excommunicated for practicing the dark arts. And he had his own army, the Order of the Sword. So he strikes a deal because this crusader has been dead for 700 years. He was killed by the hands of the Russian villagers who rose up against him because he was making a crusade across Russia. So he sides with Nazis in order to get his vengeance, basically. And not only are you getting scenes in between that explaining this, there are also more scenes cutting through the movie of other veterans, doctors, historians, novelists, like actual people discussing about the war and about people during that time and their experiences. So this is always cutting through the story. As I'm going through this story, you gotta picture every now and then you have a moment where a doctor will interject or a nurse will interject and give their perspective of what's going on. But going back to the main story with Nadia, she finally gets to the main military site that she needs to go to, the Kremlin, that was advised by the monk. She gets there, she gets nursed to health by the doctors, and eventually she meets General Below, who explains to her that she actually worked for him. He was the one in charge of Division 6. And he explains to her everything that's happening, all the stuff I just explained, and that she was part of an elite group that was aware that the Nazi Party was working with occult tactics, and so they were going to be the group that was supposed to intervene with that. But unfortunately, she's the only survivor of that group, and they got word that the Nazi group was going to try and use the spirits of the dead to try win the war. So the idea now became, let's use Nadia to have contact with her fallen comrades and then use them as like a guerrilla warfare against this army of the dead and prevent them from crossing over into the land of the living. And they figured out that they were going to use what's called the moment of truth, which is a pivotal point in history that could sway battle. And they were using Nadia as a way to kind of pinpoint what that moment of truth is because she's clairvoyant. In order to do that, they strap her into like this device that mentally transport her into the land of the dead. The goal was to meet her comrades and maybe get more intel so she can figure out what's going on. And before they send her off into the land of the dead, they give her 2 items, explaining these are all the items you need in order to survive. A sword, which is like a Japanese samurai sword or katana, and a scarf. Now, the sword, they explain, has mystic abilities, is very strong mystically, and will help defend, if not kill, the spirits while she's there. The scarf, there's no explanation. It's just a fashion accessory from what I gather. But I digress. So they send her off into the land of the dead. Soon as she gets there, she shows up in a carnival, place of her memory. She travels, and you see that the land of the dead is not segregated to only the dead of that time period or dead of the people that lived in that area. You see like Civil War soldiers. You see soldiers from Japan there. They're all in the same area of the Land of the Dead. And shortly after she gets there, she does get captured. And she gets brought to Baron von Wolf, who sees her, recognizes that she's not dead, kind of like Predator style. He sees that she has body warmth. And they do have like the thermal vision, which I thought was actually kind of cool. Like it explains like how spirits could recognize a person that's still alive in the Land of the Dead versus not alive. They are literally warm. And he sends her off to be killed by the butcher. Is basically a fat guy who likes to wear a pig mask and likes to cut up bodies. Fortunately for her, she gets rescued by her former comrades because they could sense her. Again, they trained all this time to have a mental connection with each other. So once she was there, they knew she was there and they rescued her. And that's when she clues them in on what's going on and what's the game plan. She tells them, when I come back, there will be music playing. Meet me at the carnival and we'll be able to head out from there. First, I have to figure out where's this moment of truth so we can intervene. And she gets summoned back before she actually dies because the chair's, kicking her out of her body, basically. First part of that, technically mission success. Now she's moving along, trying to travel to the next location. She stumbles on the next clue. She sees a newspaper article with a photo of a guy going back into battle after just leaving the hospital from a bombing that happened a while ago. Turns out he was the lone survivor of the military group that she was actually at. So it was her and him that both survived. And then when she saw his photo, she had the vision again of the soldier who got his head chopped off by the Crusader Knight. The camera pans over a little bit and you see it's his face. And she recognizes, okay, so this is the moment of truth. That's why I've been having these visions. That's why all this is, the pieces are falling together. So now she heads over to the site because now she knows where he's going to be, and she goes there too. And while she's waiting for things to pop off, she summons her comrades to her side. While this was all happening, her comrades on the other side were basically gearing up. And apparently, in the Land of the Dead, you can collect the weapons of the fallen soldiers. So that's what they did. They found a merchant, as it were, who was collecting the weapons of the fallen soldiers and repairing them. So they geared up and then they went to the carnival. They heard the music letting them know that it's time to be summoned, and they go through like this roller coaster that is like this twisted ride, kind of like It's a Small World after all, but it's only the memories of Nadia showing, like with puppets and imageries and all this other stuff that they have to go through. So it looks very dark. Then it cuts back to Nadia, where now she sees the army of crusaders is finally breaking through the veil, and that moment is happening. The guy who's supposed to come up and lead the charge gets out there, and time just freezes. The army of crusaders of dead are charging to take this guy's head. And as that happens, the roller coaster comes falling from the sky, hits the army of the dead, and her comrades are now just laying waste to all these crusaders. Kind of reminds me of that old saying, never bring a knife to a gunfight. One character has a flamethrower, other characters are just throwing grenades. You have this one big dude who is carrying like a giant machine gun, and then of course you have the one guy who's a sniper. So pretty much they're going to town on all the dead crusaders. Nadia takes guard of the soldier that they're wanting to protect with her one sword, because that's the only weapon she has. And you see Baron von Wolf riding in on his steed along with two other crusaders. Leo, being the sniper that he is taking out the other crusaders by his side because they're basically running guard, protecting Baron von Wolf. And as he goes to swing his sword to take off the one guy's head, Nadia interferes, knocks the sword away, and now she becomes the goal of the target for Baron von Wolf. She's about to get killed because they're going hand to hand, but let's be frank, Nadia is a little girl that was trained in combat for a short while, and it's not like she's a master samurai. And as Baron von Wolf is getting ready to deal a killing blow to Nadia, Leo, her long lost love, jumps in, pulls a gun, and shoots Baron von Wolf like several times in the chest. Von Wolf collapses. The other Crusader Knights sees this, and the armies start retreating. Now, interesting thing is, as they're retreating, one of the Crusader Knights stops for a moment, looks back, and you see Baron von Wolf's actual sword, the one that was used to summon him, on that night. But then he disappears. And Nadia's there along with her crew, and they pull off the helmet off of Baron von Wolf, and it turns out it's not the Baron. It's just a regular crusader wearing the armor of the Baron. And she's sitting there going, damn it, it's not over. Like, he got away. And her crew disappear. Then time unfreezes. And the guy who was leading charge continues leading charge. And the Russian army just rushes in waves, attacking the Nazis and the Germans. So the battle ended up being a victory for the Russian army because of that moment where the guy took charge and led the charge for all the other soldiers. And as I mentioned earlier, there's interviews that are happening during this where the other soldiers are talking about that experience from both sides, German and Russian, and they're explaining how they basically got overrun. Even though so many people died on that battlefield, the Russians basically won it out of spirit and out of, that drive, even though they had their comrades dying right in front of them and beside them. The movie ends with some closure, where General Below is talking about like the incident and they're wrapping it up. But basically, it doesn't give us a closure on the main story of the Division 6. It gives us closure about that battle, which I found interesting because it made the movie feel like you're watching a documentary more so, where they have the interviews of the people and then they're doing like reenactments. So even though it's an animated film, it feels like a documentary with the reenactment, like you would see on like Sci-Fi Channel, Discovery, Netflix, and so forth like that. And we basically just watched one episode. Even though this is an actual movie, it felt like I watched the episode of what was going to be a series. And then it ends. On that note, I'm a little bit mixed about this film. This film was interesting to me in a number of different ways. And it had some pros and it had some cons. The parts that I thought were cons, there was parts that felt broken in the film. The way they do the styling of it is very interesting. Well, let me put it this way. It got my attention right off the bat when they started the film with an interview with a live actor. Early in, I deduced that the film is going to be kind of shot in a format of a documentary where they're going to be cutting from the actual animation, where they're showing the actual story play out, to going into interviews with historians, doctors, veterans, talking about the war on both sides. So it felt heavy like a documentary, like a modern documentary where they're trying to reenact a story and they're just reinforcing that story by the interviews that's happening. It was good for that purpose, but at the same time, as you get involved in the story and you start getting more captivated in it, they will continue to break away from the story to continue another interview. So it would make me lose interest at times, because now I'm hooked on the story at one point, and then all of a sudden another old guy comes in and now I'm like, you're breaking my rhythm. So I enjoyed it, and I didn't enjoy it for that reasoning. Additionally, it didn't help that when I watched the movie, I watched it on Tubi, the app. I like Tubi. I enjoy it, but Tubi does put in commercials, and sometimes the commercials are not in good timings of the films. So combining the fact that I'm getting interruptions by the way that they're displaying the film and with the commercials of the application that I'm using, kind of takes away from it. I kind of have to grade this movie with a little bit of salt, because I can't put everything on the movie for that reason. Animation style, I like the cartoon animation that they used. It felt very smooth. It worked for me. The dubbing of the film actually was very good. I watched the movie subtitled. I did not watch it in English. And I should let you know, the version I watched, I believe, and I didn't double check, but I believe it was in Russian. I believe the movie was originally filmed in Russian. You can also find the movie like in Japanese and German, if I'm correct. The fact that you're watching the entire film in Russian makes it feel more immersive, or it made it feel more immersive to me. You're watching an environment that is supposed to be set in Russia, and they're interviewing people who are speaking Russian, so it feels really immersive. And I like that. That's a nice touch. And the lips sync much better when you're keeping the animation to the actual language that you want to simulate. Audio wise, for the sound, besides the dubbing of course, I thought was fantastic. Music chimed in appropriately in various moments, didn't overshadow like the background noise, and I think the main sound score was done by a DJ Crush. As for the general story and action, I liked the story. The concept was an entertaining concept. Action-wise, they sprinkle it in here and there. It's not like a heavy action, but it's for a short film that's only an hour and 13 minutes long. It was enough. And if you take out the cutscenes that I mentioned earlier, then the actual movie is a lot shorter. So it can be a very quick film. All that said, I'm actually going to rate that film a 2 out of 5 NerdTots. Now, I know full well that's a very low review, but there's a logic to it. For anime fans like myself, a 3 out of 5 is reasonable. But the reason I'm choosing a 2 out of 5 is I want my review to be for everybody and the general audience as well, for those who do not watch these kind of films. And I feel like the general audience may not catch on to this film that easily. For one, it's a great concept for having it done that way, where it's like a documentary feel. But if you're new to anime, that's gonna not put you in that same mindset. You're not gonna be hooked into anime from watching this film. You may appreciate it, but it's gonna not leave you with that feeling like this is actually a really good cartoon, and I can see why people are enjoying animations based on this. You can jump to that third rating. The likelihood is you're going to sit at number 2 comfortably. So that's why 2 out of 5 works for me. I just couldn't sit with the film long enough. I couldn't enjoy the parts and consistency. I couldn't enjoy the consistency of the film because it kept breaking up, even though all the other parts worked for me. It took me out of it. So sadly, that's going to be the rating it sticks with. Now, if you want to watch this film, you can find it on Amazon Prime. For rent or even buy. You can also find it on Tubi. My suggestion, if you're going into this and you want to get a better experience, you may want to rent or find it where you have no commercials. Find a streaming network that has it where there's no commercials. Maybe get the DVD, and then that way you can appreciate it more. If you're not really caring, go ahead. Watch it on a network that has commercials. Just know you're probably not going to get the same vibe out of this film. On that note, as always, I want to thank everybody who's been watching my videos, especially if you're watching this one too. Thank you so very much. Myself and everybody at NerdTots truly do appreciate everybody who does watch our content, and everybody that has subscribed and continues to like our items. We appreciate you so much. If you have comments, if you are watching this and you're not a subscriber, please click subscribe. We're going to be trying to get more content out to you. The more we see that our people are enjoying, the more it drives us to want to do more for you. Other than that, as usual, continue watching anime, expand your minds, and just be excellent out there. Laters.
Let's go.